Hi, my name is Maverick Evans, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite books by Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. So, if you're looking to try and dip your foot into like some classic literature, especially a classic American literature, and you're like, Ernest Hemingway is one of the guys I want to cross off my checklist of awesome authors that I should read before I die, but I don't know quite where to start. Well, you should maybe consider The Old Man and the Sea. This is a book that I love so much, but there are unfortunately a few people that I have spoken to that have read this book and they just didn't quite get it. They didn't, not that they didn't get it, because it's not like too intellectually deep, quote unquote. It's really not at all. It's very straightforward and easy to understand and not pretentious in any way whatsoever, which is, the kind of material that we want to be reading. But it can be kind of bland depending on how you look at it. The language used is not particularly flowery or poetic, overtly poetic. And so someone who is used to, more fanciful wording may not be impressed by this kind of book. But if you don't care about that kind of thing and you're just there for the story and what's happening and the characters and their adventure and their kind of character arc, then this is the one that might be appealing to you. It's only 100 pages. This particular copy happens to be, I think, 126 pages, and you can read it literally in a day. I don't read very fast. I read at about like 200 words per minute, which is about the same as like the voice's cadence as I'm speaking now. And I read it in a day. So I've read it twice so far, and it is a page turner. And I know that everyone says that, but this really was so gripping. I mean, even the first paragraph of the book, which, you know what, I'll just read for you now to give you kind of a taste of what it sounds like, because I think I'm maybe making it out to sound like it's boring. It's definitely not. It's just, well, here it is. I'll let you hear it. Decide for yourself. Which, by the way, if you want to avoid spoilers, this won't be a spoiler, but if you want to, then go and read the book. Like I said, it takes a day. You could probably find a free PDF somewhere online, so just go read it. Spend the next couple hours reading it, and then you can come back and maybe talk in the comments about how you thought about the story. So it says here on page 1, he was an old man who fished alone in his skiff in the Gulf Stream, and he had gone 84 days now without taking a fish. In the first 40 days, a boy had been with him, but after 40 days without a fish, the boy's parents had told him that the old man was now definitely and finally salio, which is the worst form of unlucky, and the boy had gone at their orders in another boat, which caught 3 good fish the first week. It made the boy sad to see the old man come in each day with his skiff empty, and he always went down to help him carry either the cord lines or the gaff and the harpoon and the sail that was furled around the mast. The sail was patched with flour sacks and furled. It looked like the flag of permanent defeat. Oh, so you can see there, it's kind of, for me personally, I read that for the first time and was immediately hooked. So it was a good hook for me. Maybe it wasn't a good hook for you. You may not like the very straightforward, simplistic, vanilla, if you will, kind of language. Which, by the way, just a small aside on the connotation to like vanilla. Vanilla used to be, it's like a flower. It's like a super rare delicacy. It's like extremely difficult. The flower only bloomed like once a year or something like that for like a very short amount of time. So it's an extremely rare thing that was difficult to obtain. So vanilla, you would think, was like, a great thing, but then we just attribute it to things that are plain or simple or dull or whatever. It's like, oh, it's vanilla, very vanilla. It's like, well, yeah, that's a compliment. Anyway, in that sense of vanilla as being exquisite and rare. I feel like this is a rare case in which a novella, which I think it would be categorized as, is a sweet delicacy when it comes to reading and not having to invest a ton of time. It's a book that doesn't go on longer than it needs to. It's just as long as it really requires. And so in that way, I think Ernest Hemingway really didn't take too many liberties. He didn't let it go on too long. And so he told the story that needed to be told, and then he was done with it, which is great. And I don't know about, the motivations that he may have had for writing this particular story, whether he just needed to make some money or something. But anyway, what is The Old Man and the Sea about? So it's about this guy named Santiago, and he's very old. If I recall correctly, he's about in his 80s, and he's a fisherman. I don't know if they're off the coast of New York or Italy or something like that. The characters seem to be Italian, given their names. So I'm not sure where they are, but they're off some coast. And this fisherman hasn't caught a fish in forever, man. Santiago is just on this terrible streak of bad luck. But what is lucky about him is that he has this boy who I don't think that we find out his name until pretty much the end of the story. But he takes care of him. And that's kind of where you see the first theme of the book emerge, which is this very heartwarming father-son relationship between Santiago and the boy. Now, I don't think that they're actually blood related, but they may as well be, because the boy just takes care of this guy just thoroughly. And it warms your heart. I mean, it really gives you an example of what maybe it's just me. I have a particular soft spot for father-son relationships and narrative, and they always bring happy tears to my eyes when I see really good portrayals of what like a son should be to his father, and the kind of love that I hope to accept, to cultivate and accept from my own sons, and so and all my children, and so. Yeah, you see that between Santiago and the boy, because Santiago, he's really poor. I mean, he has nothing to his name. He lives in this like little shack. He doesn't have any food. Literally has no food. And whenever he goes to bed at night, he has a blanket, thank goodness, but he doesn't even have a pillow. He has to take his trousers off, roll them up in conjunction with some newspaper, and then he uses that as a pillow. And you would think, oh, this is such a sad story about, the impoverished life of this old man and all, but not really. I mean, Santiago, there's no hint of woe is me. He doesn't feel bad for himself. There's no self-loathing going on, and there's no pity going on either from anyone. It's just the case. It is what it is. And there's not even a thought to feel bad about it at any point in the story, it doesn't seem. And so the characters handle these difficult daily situations very well. The entire story takes place over the course of maybe 24, maybe 2 days time. And so it's very succinct, but for the most part, Santiago is kind of, we're there with them the whole time. So it's a very linear story. There's very few passages of time, and there's not really very many jumps back in time either, unless of course we're kind of in Santiago's memory as he kind of thinks back on certain memories. So Santiago gets some help from the boy. He doesn't get to fish with him anymore because his parents told him not to, because he just hasn't got any fish. And well, if you're going to be a fisherman, you should probably be in the business of catching fish. and so the boy helps him get his skiff ready, which is kind of like the smallest form of boat that can still sail and catch big fish. And so it can be operated by one man, either with the sail, or you can use oars as well if there's no wind. And so he goes out onto the sea, Santiago, by himself, this old man, and he attempts to catch a big fish, which they refer to as tuna throughout the story. Whatever kind of fish it really is, as long as it's really big and kind of like a marlin or something like that, then they call it a tuna. Makes things a little simpler, I guess. And I guess it may not really matter depending on the fish that's on the end of the line if they're really big. And one thing that was really interesting is he goes out farther than he's ever gone before, which is kind of risky. You don't really think about it at first. But what was interesting to me is that he had to, and I didn't think about this because I wasn't well acquainted with like big fish fishing until this book, is that he had to like use smaller bait, these live fish, and then he would like use those to catch bigger fish, and then he would just get massive fish, like he just have to build up. You caught like 2 different fish to get to the bait big enough to serve to catch a tuna. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's insane. These fish are massive. I couldn't believe that's how you have to do it. You have to go all the way out into, wherever it is you're fishing, far out into the sea. And then you have to catch your bait as you go, incrementally increasing in size. I just thought that was really spectacular. And one of the reasons that people think that this story is very boring is because you go through all of the steps that Santiago has to take in order to fish. And so it's, him preparing the bait and talking about how, he sees the seagull out there and he uses the birds to try and determine where the fish are because they know where the fish are. And all of his interactions with the sea and how somehow, all of the men that are his age have all gone blind by, fishing too much because of the glare that comes off of the sun onto the water that inevitably shines up into your eyes, and that for some reason Santiago, by the grace of God, has been spared that kind of blindness. And yeah, then he hooks a big fish, and you don't see it for a really long time, and he fights with it and struggles with it. He has to let out a ton of line. He's having to try and manage everything all by himself. And the whole time he's just wishing, if the boy were only here, if the boy were here. And he's convinced that he has caught a fish that is bigger than any fish that he's ever seen or heard of, let alone a fish that bigger than any fish he's caught. He's never even heard of anyone catching a fish this big, but he still can't see it. And so he struggles for about 12 hours straight, trying to keep his strength. He manages with one hand to drink from a glass jug that he has full of water, and he sets out some of his bait onto the wood to dry out from the sun, and he has to eat that to try and keep his strength up. At some point he catches a dolphin as well, and he eats the dolphin meat, which he says he doesn't prefer because it's too sweet, and so sweet it would almost make him retch. And of course he had to eat it raw, and so that was difficult. Luckily, he doesn't puke, and so that's very good. And it's just such an amazing feat of physical achievement that this old man, one, had continued to labor this many years into his elderly state, and he can still keep it up. And even though he's not as strong as he was, obviously, when he was in his youth, he's still able to contend with this massive beast and to overcome the challenges of solitude and, fishing alone. And so you just can't help but get all on board with this hero's journey, and this fight and contention between man and nature. As cliche as that might sound, we're in this kind of green world, if you want to use a more like English teachery kind of term. He's gone out into this chaotic land of nature. It's, I can't think of anything more chaotic than the sea. I mean, humans really don't seem to be very physically fit to survive in the ocean, and so they have to create these, wooden vessels and everything like that to keep them afloat and out of the water somewhat. There always has to be a barrier between you and the water, otherwise you'll perish, and Mother Nature will just, you'll succumb to her in moments, really, in the grand scheme of things, especially. And yet, despite all of that, this old man, Santiago, is fending off Mother Nature entirely. Not only that, but not only is he preserving his own body despite the peril of the waters themselves, which happen to be, fairly calm because there wasn't a storm yet. Although it's coming, he can smell one. He's also wrangling Mother Nature, one of the largest beasts that he's capable of catching, of any man capable of catching with a hook and line. He's catching it, and it's been over 12 hours, and he's still fighting with it. He won't let up. He has the cable in one arm, and he has it going across his shoulders to create, a leverage mechanism, and he's fighting with it, trying to wear it out. He doesn't want it to dive, because if it dives, it'll just pull his boat down and it'll snap and be bad. And he doesn't want it to jump too soon either, which apparently the fish, they have these sacs, I guess, that go along their back or their spine. And whenever they jump up into the air, they fill with air. And what that means is that when those sacs on the back of the tuna's back fill with air, they can't go down deep to die, because the fish can, they could bleed out if the hook ends up in one of their organs or their heart. They could just give from exhaustion, have a heart attack or something like that. And if they were too far down, the fish would be too heavy to pull up. And so you want them up to the surface to where their back is full of, their back sacs are full of the air, so that they have that buoyancy to float up next to the ship and you can take it home. And so he fights it, man. And he finally gets the fish in, and he harpoons it through the heart. And it's this amazing climax, this amazing fight between man and beast. And he gets it straight through the heart and sinks it deep. He struck true, and he won against the fish. There's an interesting relationship that you get to see unfold after that between Santiago and the tuna. And it's, this kind of major personification of the fish by the old man. And he almost feels bad for it, but it's something that he had to do, and that he's gonna make full use of the meat and everything. He's gonna take it to the market and get so much money off of it. And he wishes that he hadn't had to do it. And there are many points throughout the struggle that he wishes that the fish would win the battle, that he would kill Santiago, so that he could just, almost as if, kind of like a Viking type honorable death in battle. And unfortunately for Santiago, I guess he wins and overtakes the fish. And in some ways he feels bad about it, because they're such majestic creatures that are so beautiful and powerful. And I think Santiago attributes some kind of, maybe not divinity, but some kind of royalty almost to these massive fish. And so it's a really beautiful relationship to see unfold. And there's a terrible thing that happens, though, on their way back. He is unable to fend off all of the sharks that come. The fish is much larger than the skiff even. It's almost twice the size of the skiff. And so he can secure it to the skiff and drag it along, but they're not fast enough, and he doesn't have the tools to defend against the sharks that are coming because of the blood in the water. And so he does his best to fight off these various nasty sharks that he regards as, disgusting bottom feeders, which is what they are. Which is an interesting switch, is that he does not attribute personification or at least positive personification to all of the animals that he encounters, but only those that he deems noble in some way. And the big fish are noble, the ones he enters into battle with. And the bottom feeder sharks that come by and get someone else's kill, they have no honor about them, according to him. And so he attempts to bludgeon them over the head, and he kills a few, but they end up getting massive chunks of his catch in their mouth. And by the time that he gets back to the shore, the whole fish has been devoured pretty much, and he is completely exhausted. He makes his way back up to his shack, and the entire village is in awe at the catch that they see tied to his skiff. And it's very, very sad. It's a very, very sad moment to see this failure of a fishing outing, especially after so long not catching anything. And then finally he catches the biggest fish that anyone's ever heard of or ever seen. And then it's so brutally taken away from him by nature itself. And so I guess in that way he shouldn't be upset. And he really, it's hard to tell if Santiago is very upset about it or not. I mean, he is angry. So it's not hard to tell because he is angry on the way in, but he seems to make peace with it at some point. And I really like that about Santiago. That's one thing about his characters. He seems to be extremely wise and mature in the way that he approaches things. And what's good as well is that the boy seems to be soaking all of that up from him over the years. So they're again such great role models of how you want to be as a person, when these things happen. So the boy takes care of him, gets him some coffee, and makes sure that he's going to have some food, and goes and everything. And they have their conversations again. They like talking about baseball, and it's just like it always was. The boy resolves. He decides that he wants to go work for Santiago again, and that his parents can just deal with it. And that they're going to go catch some fish together. And I think that's a great move because it seems there's kind of an illusion at the end. I don't know if it's an illusion, but kind of like a foreshadowing or a hint that Santiago has some kind of illness that will take him soon. He has a tightness in the chest, and he begins coughing a little bit. And there was a kind of blood in his cough. And I don't think that's ever a very good sign for anybody. So it's a good thing that the boy decided to kind of dedicate the remainder of his time to the remainder of Santiago's life. And so, gosh, it's such a good book. I mean, really, it's so very good. So if you haven't read it, please, I highly suggest that you do. And if you haven't gone fishing, I'm not a fisherman, and I certainly have not caught any big fish. I have friends and family who have gone out and fished in the ocean and caught very big fish, and their stories are just riveting, really, to hear about it. And one day I would love to go out and catch big fish, and really use some great techniques to make that happen, and really fight for it like Santiago did, but maybe not quite so hard, because that was grueling and rigorous. I'm not sure that I would survive even so young I am. But man, like even catching like some larger fish at like a lake or something like that really gives you at least an intimation of what it might feel like for Santiago to bring in that massive fish. And so if you do have those opportunities to go out and catch a fish somewhere and then read this book, then you need to make it happen, because it's a beautiful book, and it's one of the few books that I can confidently say is one of my absolute all-time favorites. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this, and tell me what you guys think about the book. So I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.